Hi, this is Jeff Burns, and welcome back to I Follow the Path. Today is this weekend, the weekend of June 5th, is the official relaunch of my channel, I Follow the Path, that I started over 3 years ago. And as you know, last year I went through 2 major surgeries, took a major hiatus, and God has fully healed me and restored me. So you've been seeing a couple of what I call teaser videos. They're longer teaser videos that came out in the last couple of weeks. But today is my official launch. And I can't think of any better subject to talk about than what is taking place right now in this country on the forefront. And that subject is Black Lives Matter. Now, we're in a difficult time in the United States. Well, the whole world's in a difficult time right now. COVID-19 has done a lot of damage globally. In the United States, we've had over 100,000 people die. 45 million people are unemployed. Many small businesses have had to shut down or close. We have a friend that has we have a friend that works for a company that has 3 businesses. They've gone to 1 store. Others have just had to fold up shop completely. So it's a difficult time. And with COVID-19, the future still is uncertain. We believe we're past the worst of it, and we hope so, inshallah. But the good news is we know that God is with us. He's with you. We're not to live in fear. We're to keep moving forward, and God always seems to make a way. But also, we're going through a very difficult time in this country, and it's spilling over into the UK, Europe, and other countries due to the recent deaths of African American George Floyd. We are seeing daily demonstrations and rioting across my beautiful country. These demonstrations and riots have picked up in other countries because people of color, and rightfully so, are angry. It is a time when people of color in this country are fed up with injustice, and they are demanding that the unfulfilled dream of Martin Luther King be actualized in our time. Martin Luther King wrote a beautiful book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? I encourage you to read it. It is so relevant for our time. So I want to take just a few moments to dedicate this video to George Floyd, who was killed senselessly on May 25th. I also dedicate this video to Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered for simply taking a jog through a white neighborhood in Atlanta. My prayers and support go out to their families and other people of color in this country who have died unnecessarily because of a broken political system and racial profiling. My prayers are with these victims of injustice and abuses of power. And you may say, Jeff, you're a white guy. Why are you making this video? I am a white guy, but I'm also a servant of the Most High God. He's called me to cry out against injustice and unrighteousness. I do this because I am a follower of Isa al-Masih, of Jesus Christ. I'm a follower of the books. That's why I do this. And also I have a strong invested interest. My daughter, Olivia, is half African American. So what happens to people of color impacts her. And so I am taking a stand today in speaking out for people of color and for and say that I believe that Black Lives Matter. You know, an interesting thing happened to me, I guess about a week ago. I'm an avid bodyboarder. I love to catch waves. Oh my goodness. I tell you, I'm a peacemaker, but man, I'm not doing peacemaking. I'm in the ocean. I love to catch those beautiful waves. I've experienced God out there with creation. I could tell you some wonderful stories of just feeling God's presence in those waves and feeling like I'm 10 years old again every time I catch a wave. I'm even writing a book about this. So I make a habit to go up to the sea each day to check on the surf, to see how she's doing, how the ocean's doing, and if she wants to play or she's just, if there's nothing there to catch. So one day I went up to the ocean just to take a few minutes. I call it, my family makes a joke, they call it taking a peek at the sea. So I went up to take a peek at the sea just to see how the surfing conditions were. And like I said, I only intended to be there 5 or 10 minutes. But I met this very handsome young couple from Italy. And I spoke to them. And when I spoke to them, they wanted to have a conversation with me. And the husband, he was a very, very nice person, but he said to me, he said, you know, you're the first person who has actually said hello to us since we've come to this island. And then they asked me a question that I was rather perplexed by at first until the conversation began to unfold. And he said, "Where are all the Americans?" And he said it with a beautiful Italian accent, speaking English. And I was puzzled by their question. And I told them, "Where are all the Americans? They're everywhere. They're everywhere." And the husband said to me, he says, "We want to move to this country, but we want to be around white Americans." He made this very clear. We only want to be around white Americans. We keep running into black people and Mexicans and other Hispanics. And he said, they are not good people. Now I'm standing there. I just want to go look at the ocean. I was stunned by his honesty. I didn't quite know how to respond at first. You've had those moments where somebody just kind of throws something at you and you just kind of like, you almost want to laugh awkwardly because you're so caught off guard, you don't know what to say. I was stunned by his honesty. And so when I took a moment, because I believe we need to pause before we speak on this issue sometime and react. And I asked the Lord, I asked God, I asked Allah to give me wisdom about what to say to this young couple. Now, after a few questions, I realized that this young couple had had some bad experiences with people of color. He described some things that happened in Italy with some immigrants that came in his neighborhood. That doesn't mean all immigrants are bad. I want to make that very clear. But he had a bad experience. He was in a major city in the United States. He had a bad experience. And so what he was doing, he was doing what we would call profiling. And he had, so he was, did not want to be around black people or Hispanics. So he was profiling them. Now, if you know anything about me, or you've heard my story, you realize that although as a Christian minister for 18 years, I took a strong stand against racism, and it cost me a lot, but I would go back and do it again in a heartbeat. But I had a similar prejudice in my heart towards my Muslim neighbors 15 years ago. I used to hate Muslims. I used to think all Muslims were like bin Laden and the Taliban and all these groups. I used to think that all of them had secret links to terrorism, or at least were empathetic to those causes. But God changed my heart. And if you would like to check out my story, I always bring it up because this story is important. It impacts people's lives. If you'd like to check out my story of my encounter with Omar and how he changed my life, you can click it, the bubble right now, or get the link in the description below. So as I was listening to this beautiful young couple, who in one way I felt like, even though they were saying some pretty heavy stuff, they really were just kind of mimicking what they had already experienced. I could have reacted. I could have been angry. I could have said, preached them down, put them down. But I wanted to try to reason and appeal not only to their mind, but to their hearts. So I went on to tell this couple about my story. And I said to them how God changed my heart towards Muslims, that I used to hate Muslims. And he goes, "Oh, yes, we got Muslims in our country, too." And he goes, they're all closed-minded, and they're all narrow-minded, and they're dangerous people. And I shared how I had deep-rooted stereotypes and fears concerning them before I met a little Muslim boy named Omar in a Starbucks coffee shop on Creedmoor Road in Raleigh, North Carolina. I told him my story, how God changed my heart through that little boy as he attempted to teach me Arabic for about 20 or 30 minutes. After I met Omar, I couldn't hate Muslims anymore. And I could tell he was stunned. I could tell he was softening, beginning to soften a little bit. And I could tell that they weren't used to hearing a white person talk about people of color and other religious backgrounds in such a positive light. They were fully expecting me to enter into this racist conversation and be favorable towards it. I tried to tell them and help them understand what horrible suffering African Americans have experienced in this country, and what people and how that white people can be so blind to their struggle, because to be white in the U.S. is, I don't mean this wrong when I say it, but people treat you better. Some call it white privilege. Well, white people don't want to admit it, but it's true. You're treated differently than you are people of color. That doesn't mean that everybody has it bad if you're a person of color, but you are treated differently. So as I pointed this out to them, as I pointed out to them that some people in this country could likewise be prejudiced towards them. I said, look, you want to immigrate, you want to be an immigrant to this country. America right now is not real warm to a lot of immigrants. I said, you have beautiful olive skin, you're Italian. Somebody could see you coming from a distance and they might think you're an Arab, or they might think you are a Muslim, or they might think you're half black or half white. I mean, I said, so if you come to this country, you could experience racism because of the color of your skin and because of your accent and because you're an immigrant. And I began to realize that the message began to sink in. He said, well, what about all these black people in jail? The majority of people in this country, the jails are full of black people. And I said, well, because the system's broken. It's unjust. Now, I have a video put in the link below. If you hit it in the bubble, put a link below. It's called, I'm trying to remember, I'm going blank. Please forgive me. It's called anyways, it deals with why systemic racism survives in this country. And it goes back to our public schools. I want you to check it out. I think you'll find it helpful. It will answer. And I told him about this. I said, let me give you a scenario. If I have a white son or a white daughter, and they are caught by the police with marijuana, smoking, or they're caught smoking marijuana, they might take them in, fingerprint them, but we could probably get them a decent lawyer, get the charges dropped, or get it reduced, or get something, community service. A black young man or young woman may be in the same scenario, and the judge might throw the book at them, and they go to jail for months or even years. And yes, this has happened many times in our country, over and over again. This is one of the reasons our prisons have so many black people in them, and why it's disproportional. It's because of a broken, unjust system. As I was parting with them, I smiled and I looked at this couple and I said, fear destroys all. We must learn to step into the shoes of another person to understand them and develop empathy. To develop this type of empathy requires a teachable spirit. It requires being curious. It requires becoming friends and getting to know each other. I've decided, I told them, I said, I've decided to live my life by loving God with all my heart, loving my neighbor as myself, and treating other people the way I want to be treated. And if I find enemies along the way, do everything within my power to make them my friends. I said, this is my creed. And this is the creed of my master Jesus, or Isa. This is the creed that you will find in the Qur'an and in the Hebrew scriptures. And I said, I've chosen to live this way of treating other people the way I want to be treated. So I smiled at them and said good day to them. They smiled back, and I said, God bless you guys. I said, it was just it was great to really meet you today. And they looked back at me and said, God bless you, sir. Thank you for your kindness, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. Now, I came to a conclusion as I was sitting there, and I began to walk off. I smiled. I thought to myself, I said, God, when I said God bless you to them, I prayed. I said, Lord, I think maybe just a little, this couple moved closer to the kingdom of God. Maybe just a little. They moved closer to the straight path because of that conversation. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, we peacemakers and bridge builders, we have a lot of work to do. Oh my gosh, we have a lot of work to do. And I am more committed now to the dream of Martin Luther King. I'm a white man, and I love the speech, I Have a Dream. I am more committed to the dream of Martin Luther King than I've ever been. And if you haven't heard the speech by Martin Luther King on I Have a Dream, I have put it in the bubble, or it's in the description below. You've got to watch it. Watch it. You'll catch the vision. In this dream that Martin Luther King has, it's the dream of God for all of us, that we would become a beloved community. So I encourage you to watch this speech. Now, here's the objection. Objection. I'm talking funny today. Objection. Some people will say to me, well, and it's predominantly white people, not all, but predominantly. So we ain't got no racial problem in this country. Nobody wants, they don't want to talk about it. Don't want to admit it. Man, you start talking about racism in this country, white people get uncomfortable. I know. I was a pastor. They don't want to talk about it, you know? So I want to just take a moment and just show you how big the problem is. The Pew Report. There was a Pew Report done. And they interviewed over 8,000 black and white police officers. And I put a link below to that report so you can read the details of yourself. So I'm just going to highlight some of this so you can understand the problem. These are police officers, black police officers and white police officers. And here's what they're saying. Black officers are about twice as likely as white officers, 57% versus 27%, to say that recent deaths of blacks during encounters with police are signs of a broader problem and not isolated incidents. 27% of the white police said there's no broader problem. This is not motivated by racism. 57% of the black cops says we got a broader problem here. And yeah, it is dealing with racism and poverty. The general public is also divided. I'm just reading this right now. Divided by race on this question. But the majorities of both blacks, 79%, and whites, 54%, say recent fatal encounters are part of a broader problem and aren't isolated incidents in our communities. About 7 in 10 black officers, which is 69% of those that were interviewed, say that protests, now catch this, are motivated some or a great deal by a genuine desire to hold police accountable for their actions, compared with just 27% of white officers who hold this view. So almost 70% of black officers said these demonstrations are happening to hold policemen accountable for abuse of people of color. Only 27% of white cops said the same thing. Now I want to make it clear right now, always, you start talking about this subject, people say, oh, you know, I get in trouble. I want to make it very clear. The majority, I believe, of policemen and women in this country who serve this country are great people. They're just doing their jobs. They're just doing their jobs. And most of them are wonderful people, but we've got a lot of angry cops out here, and we got a lot of angry people that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and they probably should not be in law enforcement. I know they deal with a lot of stuff. I know they deal with a lot of trouble, but there's no excuse for the things that are happening in this country. And the Pew Report goes on to say white officers, for example, are substantially more likely than black officers, 60% compared with 32%, to say relations between blacks and the police force in their community are excellent or good. So the 60% of black officers will say, no, relationship between blacks and their communities and the police are not good. 27% of the white police officers, say, yep, they are good. 32%, excuse me. So black officers and white officers have totally different views. Excuse me just a moment, I'm having some trouble here. Black officers and white officers have totally different views when it comes to the way their departments handle decisions too. This was in the Pew Report. About half of the black officers, 53%, for instance, say that their white counterparts are treated better than minorities when it comes to assignments and promotions. Just 1% of white officers agree with that assessment. Now, there's another objection I've run into. So here we have African American police say we've got a big problem. Majority of blacks and whites in this country are saying we got a big problem. But we got a significant number of policemen saying we don't have a big problem. There's not a racial problem. Now, there's another objection. And I hear this one. When I start talking about this, I say, quit talking about white privilege. Oh my gosh, Jeff, quit talking about white privilege. There is no white privilege. There is no racial problem. Everybody gets a fair shake in this country. This is why slavery ended over 200 years ago, and black people just need to get over it and pull themselves together and get moving. Well, slavery ended 200 years ago, but the bigger problem is it wasn't until the 60s with Martin Luther King that we began to see a bigger changing where black people actually started getting some of these rights that were promised to them by promised to all people in this country by the founding fathers. So watch that video on the systemic roots of racism. I think you will find it happens. You know, I remember my first experience with white privilege. I was young. I didn't understand it fully at the time. A friend of mine, I was 16. We went to Haiti. We were down there doing some mission work, and we were giving out medicine, feeding the poor, doing all kinds of really cool projects. And I had about a bunch of traveler's checks, which were worthless in Haiti at that time. It's in the 70s. So I was in this long line to go into this small bank to get my traveler's checks turned into currency. Well, there were a lot of black people in front of me. All of a sudden, somebody from the bank came and got me and my friend, took us to the front of the line, treated us like royalty, and gave us our money. I thought, wow, they must be doing this because we're guests in their country or something. And they looked at me and said, it's because of your face. We respect your face. And I realized after that the reason I got pushed to the front of the line, in front of others, these other black Haitians, was because of the color of my skin. Man, that's not good. You know, I have a friend, his name is LC. We grew up together. And I can remember back in the 60s when they started integrating school, and even in our little small town, our teacher did not want us to be friends. Our teacher tried to discourage my mother, and I'll tell you another story about that, from letting us be friends. But my mother held the line, and she encouraged our friendship, and we became like blood brothers during that time. But I can remember LC being afraid to walk through our neighborhood. I can remember neighbors not wanting to let him walk through their yards. These things happen. Now, folks, things have gotten better in a lot of ways. They have, but it's not enough. Right now, we got a boil that's about to burst in this country. White people, and I'm one of them, have to let go of their defensive egos, and we have to put ourselves in the shoes of people of color. I had to put myself in the shoes of my Muslim neighbors. I had to do it in order to change. Well, I've never been pulled over because of the color of my skin. I've never been watched when I'm walking through a neighborhood to see if I'm going to cause trouble, or be followed by a clerk because of the color of my skin, but thinking that I might steal. I've never had people yell racial slurs at me because of my color. I've never had to change my name from Muhammad or Ahmed to Mike or Sam because I was afraid I would be overlooked for a job. I have never had those experiences. And you know what that is? That's white privilege. That's what it is. Now, some people don't like the phrase Black Lives Matter. And what they end up doing is they try to minimize it. And they say, well, here's the fault with the movement. Every movement has its faults. But right now, right now people are doing the best they can. And so people are coming along. And once again, it's either affluent people or, unfortunately, or white people. And they're saying, no, I don't like it. Black lives matter. All lives matter. You know, when we say all lives matter right now in this country, when a white person says that, I'm minimizing the pain of people of color, of African Americans. You know, it's just wrong. Stop saying it. You know, we can say, I could come and say, my house is on fire. A friend of mine posted this on Facebook. I don't know if it's his quote or one that he had found. I can say, my house is on fire. My house is on fire. And all my neighbors can come out and say, well, your house matters, but all houses matter. Yes, all houses may matter, but when my house is on fire, it matters the most. And right now, Black Lives Matter. And right now, to the African American community, it matters the most. And we need to not minimize that pain. So what can you do? Well, it's not that complicated. You can educate yourself about race in this country. I've given you a description. I call it, an anti-racist book list, if we want to call it, a starter kit. There's books you can read that I think you'll find helpful. Another thing, so you need to educate yourself. One is you need to make friends with people of color. Just go out and begin to make friends. And you know what? Listen to their stories. Don't critique them. Listen to their story. Ask them how they feel right now in this country. How have they experienced racism? How do they feel about anxiety about law enforcement? And like I said, I'm not against law enforcement. I'm saying this, we're dealing with a reality right now. Ask them, have they ever been profiled, pulled over unjustly? Just listen to their story. Put yourselves in their shoes. Now, if you happen to be white or in an ethnic group that is in a majority group, stand up. Here's another thing you do for your brothers and sisters who are suffering and being abused and profiled. This coming Tuesday, I will be, me and a group of other clergy, including a rabbi and an imam and other interfaith clergy. We're going to be having a prayer vigil downtown in Wilmington. We're going to do this. We want to do something. It won't be violent. We're not going to be doing that, but we want to take a stand. We want to let people know where we stand as the religious leaders of our hour in our day. Another thing you can do is be proactive, not violent. The Watts riots did not accomplish, Martin Luther King said, what the people of Watts hoped for. It was a temper tantrum. Yes, it was. It's what it was. King said it himself. He said, when people are hurting so bad and nobody's listening, they will react in rioting just to get somebody to see them. So read King's book, Strength to Love. Read the autobiography of Martin Luther King. It's in my description below. If you're a Muslim, I encourage you to read my favorite Muslim scholar, Fareed Isaac. He was on Mandela's Reconciliation Council. He wrote a book about, it's called Liberation, and the Qur'an and Liberation. It's in my notes, a great book. And he was challenging Muslims to stand up against apartheid. I encourage every Muslim to read this book because according to your book, you should be one of those leading the way. Now, I'm about to wrap up here soon, but I want to say this. If you're a Jew or Jewish, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Christian, our scriptures demand that we stand up for justice, that we stand up for the weak, and that we stand up for the oppressed. You can't get around it. You can't do it. You may not want to put it in the bulletin. You may not want to rock the boats because you think you're taking sides with a certain political group. You're not. You're standing up for justice, the weak, and the oppressed. And I want to just read a couple of ayahs and scriptures from these faith communities and what they say about this issue of justice and equity and righteousness and standing up for people right now who need to be empowered. The Qur'an says, and I love this, believers, I'm reading it to you, uphold justice, bear witness to God, even if that witness is against yourself, your parents, or your close relatives. Whether a person is rich or poor, God can best take care of both. Refrain from following your own desires so that you do not act unjustly. And if you distort the truth, God is fully aware of what you do. Surah 4, 135. Here's another one in Surah 5, for Ayah 8. Believers, always be steadfast in your devotion to God. Catch this now. Equitably bearing witness to the truth. Never let hatred or any people lead you to deviate from being just to them. Be just, for that is closer to being mindful of God. Always be mindful of God. God is well aware of what you do. He's saying, when you do justly and you stand up for the weak, you are being mindful of God. And in the Hebrew scriptures, it says in Micah 6:8, know, O people, the Lord has told you what is good. This is what he requires of you, to do what is right, to love mercy, to walk humbly, with your God. To do what is right. People, it's time to do what is right. It's going to be messy. And to love mercy, be eager to be reconciled and walk humbly with your God. And Martin Luther King loved Amos 5:24. He quoted it a lot. He says, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And then Isaiah 51 verse 8 tells us, if you are a minister, if you claim to be a prophetic person, if you're an imam, or if you're a rabbi, Isaiah 58 verse 1 says, shout with the voice of a trumpet, shout aloud, don't be timid, tell my people of their sins. And Jesus said in the Injil, and this is in Matthew 23 verse 23, what sorrows await you, teachers of religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the most important aspects of the law, justice, mercy, faith. You should tithe. Yeah, it's important. Jesus said, yes, but do not neglect the more important things, justice, mercy, and faith. These are the words of Jesus. And then in Matthew 9, or NGL Matthew 9, verse 13 says, then he added, now go and learn the meaning of the scripture. I will have mercy and not sacrifices. For I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. Jesus stood up for justice, mercy, and compassion. Jesus would be concerned about black lives, and he would say, they matter. Well, some people will say, well, Jeff, I like what you're saying, or I don't like what you're saying. And I have an objection. I'm not black. I'm not Hispanic. I'm not Jewish. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not Hindu. I'm not a Sikh. So why should I be concerned about the racial, religious, and ethnic unrest that is happening in this country? Now, let me tell you something. It'd be easy if you're from India, Pakistan, or other countries right now to be hearing what I'm saying, say, oh, America's a bad country. But I know in your countries you have similar issues. You have similar problems. You have similar struggles. So what I'm saying here applies to other nations of the world. This is a human problem. So if I'm not a Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, why should this matter to me? If you don't get involved, the wolf will eventually come to your door. About 2 years ago, my wife said to me one day, she said, you know, Jeff, you've been a peacemaker for 15 years. I'm real concerned about the rise of white supremacy in this country. We have a daughter who is half African American. Would you please wait till she's 18? She was 11 at the time. Before you start engaging peace work again, can you just take a break right now? My wife was scared, and rightly so. And I told her, I said, honey, Martin Luther King about dealt with the same thing. He was scared. His house was bombed twice. And I'm not Martin Luther King. I can't compare myself. I'm just saying he was afraid. And no doubt Coretta Scott King was scared too at first until God gave them the strength they needed. But I told my wife, I says, when the wolf comes to your door, you can ignore it and leave the door closed. And it'll eventually go to somebody else's door and cause them pain. But you mark this down very clearly, and in your heart, the wolf will eventually come back to your door. Now, next week, I want to introduce you to your beautiful Muslim neighbors. I've spent years listening to this community, and I want to share their hearts with you about who they are, what they desire, and what causes them anxiety and joy in this country. I know. I've taken the time. What I've told you to do right now, people of color, I've done this with the Muslim community. And I'm going to close with a story in a moment, but I do ask you to do this. I ask you to like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell, support the launching of my channel. If you like my peace story, you like education and information like this, please take a moment to do that. I would be most grateful. And also, in the description below, in the bubble above, I have a recording of the speech of President John F. Kennedy, who gave a magnificent speech right after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And it is so timely for our nation today. So, why should you care? Even if you're not black, even if you're not a person of color, why should you care? I want to read to you a short poem. It's called First They Came. It is written by a Lutheran pastor named Martin Niemöller, and he was part of the Confessing Church in Germany who opposed Adolf Hitler's rise to power. This poem exposes the cowardice of the religious leaders and the German intellectuals who were afraid to speak out about Hitler's rise to power, and they paid a price for their cowardice, and they paid a price for not speaking out. And as a result, 6 million Jews died, and hundreds and millions of others died across Europe because of Adolf Hitler. And this is what this minister said. He said, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up. It is time for everyone, black, white, Muslim, Hindu, Jew, Indian, Pakistani, all of us. Hispanic. I could go on and on and on and on. It's time for all of us to speak up in our nations. It's time for all of us to work to fulfill the dream of Martin Luther King, that we would all become one beloved community. And you know what's so unique about Martin Luther King's dream? It's not just some crazy idea. Martin Luther King's dream was the dream of God for all people on this planet. It's a dream of love and peace and goodwill towards all. God bless you. Check out the resources in the description below, and with the links I've given you a bunch of resources, and I hope you'll read or look at some of these. Let's be proactive. Let's love well. Let's enter into this thing and take a stand for God and for our neighbors. And let's bring enemies together and help them become friends. God bless you, and thank you for watching. I Follow the Path.